Well, good evening. Welcome to the December 10th Council Appointed Officer Committee Special Meeting. If the clerk can call the roll.
Councilmember Vinker?
Here.
Chair Stone?
Here.
Councilmember Burt?
Here.
All present.
Thank you. Do we have any public comments for anything not on the agenda?
There are no requests to speak for general public comment.
Okay, then we'll go to our first action item, a discussion and debrief and recommendation to the City Council regarding the Council Appointed Officer Performance Evaluation process. I will turn it over to staff or Dan Rich, who's here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No real report. You got a memo that I drafted, just a short summary of the process and a reminder of the timeline. I did throw in some possible topics for the committee to talk about. Really, the point of tonight is, to debrief on the process, what worked, what didn't work, any changes you'd like to incorporate for next year while it's still fresh in your mind. So I'll leave it to you to take on any or all of those topics and any additional ones you have. And I would also encourage the CAOs to weigh in on their thoughts on how it worked from their perspective. I did have a chance to talk to most of them afterward, but they're all here in person or online, I believe, and they may have some thoughts as well on some tweaks to the process.
Great, thank you. And maybe let's see if there's just any public comment on this item. Before then, we'll come back and then I'll invite our CAOs to share any initial thoughts you might have. And if you don't have any initial thoughts, that's fine. Then maybe we can engage this in kind of a more informal discussion then. So let's go to public comment. Are there any?
We do not have any requests to speak.
Okay, great. Then we'll come back. So any of our CAOs, maybe we could start with our city manager if there are any initial thoughts you want to provide, and then we'll go to city attorney, city clerk, and then our city auditor.
Very good.
And don't feel like you have to if you don't.
Sure,
if you're not prepared.
And I'll be very brief. I would just acknowledge and appreciate the opportunity to review the process. The only point I would reinforce is the first bullet in terms of timeline. I think it's in everyone's interest to try to complete a timely review, and to the extent, again, that we're really working on a fiscal year basis, that since the period closes at the end of June, the sooner we can complete the process, again, the best interest in everyone, for everyone, particularly, again, one of the basic principles for any personnel review or feedback is timely feedback. So with that, my only comment.
Thank you. City attorney?
Thank you. I also had schedule on my list. I know the council endeavors, but if you could redouble your efforts, I think getting that feedback earlier in the fiscal year where there's really more time to operationalize and implement, and I know council agrees with that and the consultant does as well. I guess I'd also like to make a broader and a bit more fuzzy comment, as this is my last opportunity to engage with you on this. In my view, as a public executive serving the city, the executives work in partnership with the council to jointly advance the goals of the city as set by the city council. And we have distinctive and complementary roles. And I always approach, and I think that you also do, the performance evaluation process as a chance to exchange information and perspectives and really focus on, in a forward-looking way, on improvements that can be made, adjustments to improve our partnership and the effectiveness that each of us has in our complementary roles. But somehow the way that process actually rolls out, even though it's structured as a dialogue with an initial self-report from the CAOs, which we are doing, I think, our best effort to talk to you from our perspective about what we have accomplished and worked on, the barriers we've faced, the challenges and risks that we see for the city. And so it's our attempt to start a dialogue. You then have your piece, and then the culmination of the process has tended, I think, to focus on particular occurrences and incidents, some of which are perhaps fact-dependent or one-off, and they tend to be backward-looking. So to the extent that council can really endeavor, and I'm sorry, I do not have specific practical suggestions for you, but just an encouragement to raise the conversation to a thematic level and a strategic level, and perhaps items that really on scrutiny, although perhaps problematic, were very discrete and not emblematic of a pattern, are not as important to be addressed through this process as the larger strategic conversation about how to improve the partnership and effectiveness going forward. Thanks.
Thank you. City Clerk?
Thank you. I just second what City Manager and City Attorney say on scheduling. That would be helpful on the timeline. And other than that, just thank you to the committee and council for the opportunity to review.
Thank you. And City Auditor?
Yes, echoing what everybody else commented on with schedule. I think in particular with the audit plan kind of being determined at the end of each fiscal year for the following fiscal year, it's harder to incorporate feedback given kind of mid-year into that process. So, but definitely appreciated the opportunity to engage with council and get your input and feedback. So thank you.
Thanks, and that's a good perspective on the kind of the timeline of the audit plan and how, and the time that you're getting our feedback. Appreciate that. All right, then back to the committee for any discussion. Yep, Pat.
I was thinking about, first on the timeline and related to this, the alignment with the calendar year goals versus the fiscal year review timeline. I'm not quite sure how to reconcile that. And if we were to move the reviews a little bit later, then it gets closer to a summation of the calendar year, but it would not be at the end of it. If we move the period to after the first of the year and the completion of the calendar year and the calendar year goals, then we also get into every couple of years the prospect of new council members being in on a review that they really don't have much context on. So that's not an easy fix. So one possibility might be to actually move it a month or so later, which in practice, we end up pushing it out, and it has, when did we wrap this up, Dan? On
The last closed session was in mid-November.
Yeah. So I'm also thinking about the first steps, which aren't very heavy on the council time demands, but the things that happen in May are during budget season, which is one of the crunch times, but they're not real heavy demands to have a CAO committee meeting. And then one of the things is whether we as council members can receive the self-evaluations during our summer break, so that we actually have more time to be reflective, and it doesn't mean everybody's going to be able to spend time on it during their break, but it does create, at least for me, I know it's a little more opportunity, and to do it in a way that is, thoughtful and not rush between meetings and all those kinds of things. Did we follow this timing this last year pretty closely on when we received this?
Yeah, the calendar in your packet is the exact timing from this year. It did change a little bit and get delayed a little bit from the one that you had adopted at the committee meeting in the spring.
So I don't have any good solutions, but just want to lay those considerations out there.
Just on that point, I don't know if this is doable, but it is odd that we're making compensation decisions 6 months retroactive, right? So it's pretty much a 5 to 6 month process that we do. If there were a way to put it in the first part of the year before the contract. So in other words, looking back at the calendar year prior, making comp decisions in the first 6 months in time to negotiate and have it come into effect June 1, July 1, whenever that contract cycle is, or somehow sync it up so that it kind of makes sense would be, I know it's very out of the box, very different than what we do, but and you'd have to have one catch-up cycle where it was off. But that's just a thought. But yes, if there's some ways we could compress it so it doesn't take so long, I would support that. The other thing I wanted to mention on a somewhat different note is I'm wondering if we should consider, I mean, we do a lot of special meetings around here. We're going to do one tonight on rail. What if we did, and we do them, you know, to interview board and commission candidates or attorney candidates. What if we had a special meeting where we reviewed all 4 CAOs so that you're not sitting there worrying about that night's item, you know, on top of this whole conversation that we want to be thoughtful and as relaxed as possible, and so that we can have the kind of candor and relationship building that the city attorney referenced that we could and should, in my view, aspire to. So that would be an interesting thing to consider, is just take it, you know, not put it on a regular meeting. So I'd like us to think about that. I do think that addressing the performance that we would like to see from a thematic and strategic level is appropriate. Sometimes when we do that exclusively at that level, the message doesn't get across and people like examples, so we're not just talking. But I agree that if we focus on the examples first, we may never get to that thematic. So it's a balance, but I hear what you're saying, and I think instead of focusing on a misstep here or there, or perceived misstep, that we talk about, you know, sort of the why, the theme, the goal, and the where we want to go. So I think that's good feedback to us to hear. I think also that, I mean, one of the things that was, that Mr. Rich asked in our staff report was about sort of the questions that we answer, that we ask, that kind of thing. I think an interesting question to add that I don't recall us asking of the CAOs is, what would be helpful to you? How can we support you in achieving the expectations we set? Be interesting to know, because there might be things that would not occur to us that we might want to consider. It doesn't mean we have to do them, or we might have some other perspective on that, but that would be interesting to add into the mix, because if what we're really going for here is to be in a partnership that gets the best performance from everybody, council, CAOs, the whole ELT, all of that, that would be interesting. It's to sort of see and hear from all perspectives how we could achieve that. And it seems like this is the logical time to have that conversation. I can't think of another, you know, ready instance during the normal processes of the year. And then finally, I would like, going forward, just as a council member, and perhaps I missed this or did not as played in on this, but the distinction that the CAOs have from most other employees, certainly their direct reports and others, who get a COLA under the contracts we set, and they do not. So there's a little bit of an apple and oranges thing there, and I just want to make sure that we are considering expressly what that does with respect to compression at the top, and what, if any, effect that has on market standing of our CAOs, whom we want to be at the top of the game in their field. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we're all in agreement on the timeline that that this could definitely be changed. I had a similar kind of, I think, frustration with the timeline as the vice mayor. I didn't make the connection as far as the kind of, as you mentioned, the raise issue and talking about the compensation. I also have that, but I was also kind of thinking about I always find the oddity of the evaluation by our CAOs really happening at the mid-year point. But by the time we're through this entire process, we're basically at the end of the year. It's always uncertain, I think, to council. Kind of, Dan, I asked you this many, many times, as far as what are we evaluating, what time period, because we're in this evaluation process for so long. So I also don't have a solution here. I do think this is something that maybe the CAO chair next year or whatever this committee is at that time can work with you, Dan, to kind of see how can we revise this process, because it's never been my favorite process, and I think a big part of it is because of just this whole timeframe. But I think what Councilmember Burt was mentioning as well has always been I've also kind of struggled with, well, do we do it after the start of the new year, earlier after kind of the summer break, or then trying to figure out, well, when are our agendas even more full? It seems like they can't get fuller than they are, but I mean, there are times of the year where the cadence does slow a little bit, and I think that is one of the good things about the current timeline is we do tend to be a little less busy September and October, so that's good. But I definitely agree with the vice mayor's suggestion about a special meeting doing all of this, because we never get done with these evaluations in the time that we say we will, especially with certain CAOs. It's exhausting. We always end up having to continue it, and so I really like that idea. I think that would benefit the CAOs, it would benefit, I know, me. And then to the city attorney's point, I'd love for us to just, and I'm sure it's more of a norms of how we approach this in these closed sessions, but I agree. I think at times it often feels like we're being critical for the sake of just giving criticism, and to some extent that's important because it is an evaluation, and I like you mentioned talking about like recognizing patterns. So I think us bringing up specific examples when it comes to patterns makes a lot of sense, but oftentimes we just get so distracted on everybody kind of needing to share their little grievance, and I don't think that's beneficial, unless it's a real egregious thing that a council member experienced that they feel like others need to be aware of for the sake of the evaluation. That'd be then maybe, but I do think we can change this process. I'd say one thing is I don't think anyone, at least what I'm hearing tonight, I don't think anyone's really wedded to this particular process of how we've done it. So I would be very curious about learning how do other cities do it. I know we all serve on various regional boards that also evaluate their appointed officers, and I haven't personally observed any process that's much better or worse than ours, but I think there's definitely opportunities. And I'm just looking at the questions that was posed. Oh, and then on the city auditor, I definitely agree. I don't think it makes sense to, as long as we continue to have the same kind of model with our city auditor not being in-house. I think it makes more sense to treat that a little differently, and maybe having heard from Ms. Murdoch tonight too about the timing not working out well with the kind of the audit plan. I think that would then make a lot of sense to change up when we do that. At least that removes one CAO from this work and hopefully save us a little bit of time, and schedule that for a time during the year that that aligns a little better with the city auditor's work. Are there any additional, oh, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. So first, I want to echo the concept of having a special meeting for the in-person reviews. Historically, I think that's what we used to do, and I don't know when the practice changed, but, this time we had schedule. We ended up taking more of the time we needed, a half hour for the city attorney because she was departing. We would have taken longer if she was staying, but for the clerk and the auditor, and we clearly wanted, this is once a year, we have an in-depth conversation that is really intended to be strategic, and I think that's drastically inadequate, and so having it in a special meeting is good. This is intriguing on the concept of peeling off the auditor review and doing that on a different timing, because that just means we aren't all jammed up with 4 of these in this time frame. That really functionally is about 3 months that we're doing it. And I was looking for ways to really take advantage of what is typically a fairly light August schedule and try to compress anything we can in that. And then we do have a question, it's the question I, which was on how we can help them achieve greater success. So that's already in there. What do you need from the council in the next fiscal year and beyond to be successful? Whether that gets reframed slightly, but conceptually it's intended to be there, but maybe we give some greater depth to that. And one thing that I wanted to bring up is that we didn't have an opportunity after the in-person interviews to then reconvene and discuss amongst ourselves how we thought the in-person interview went and whether we realized there were kind of follow-up observations or whatever that we wanted to share with one another or anything. We didn't have that recap opportunity. I think that, for me, was a really important, it would have been an important and valuable step. It doesn't have to be real long, but we didn't have that at all. And then on the issue of these one-off issues, I think it's exactly right that if we just speak in generalities, it's often of, well, that's a characterization, but there's no examples. So what we really want are emblematic examples that illustrate the more broader issue and not to have it be about individual grievances and over whatever happened 1 month out of a year or whatever. And so I think just in the guidance to the council, we can emphasize that in terms of what's being asked, and just as a reminder for us, because we get reminded of things and we go, oh, that's right, I should think that way. So those are my other thoughts. Thanks.
Yeah, just briefly, I concur with that, and I like the language that the chair used in talking about patterns versus grievances. What's illustrative perhaps of a pattern just for communication as opposed to just airing grievances. So I think that I agree with Councilmember Burt. That's a good reminder to all of us. So back on the possibility of a special meeting devoted to this, one thing we could do if we went that route is we could build in 20, 30-minute reflections, conversations immediately after each one, and then if we're running a little late, we could compress that to try to stay on a more predictable schedule for the CAO's convenience. So that's something we could do, but I would be very curious to hear from our CAOs whether or not that would be better or worse for you to have like just a special night where we just do that and dissociate it from a regular meeting.
Well, as it happens, it was on my list of recommendations as well. So I think setting the date and doing that as early as we can is in everyone's interest.
Great. Are there other things on your list we should hear? I get,
It's not relevant for me personally, but just if my experience is emblematic, I've done it both ways. As Councilmember Burt recalls, we used to do it special, and I appreciated that, the chance to just really focus on this dialogue. It's intense on our end, and it's a little bit hard to incorporate that into the regular work of a meeting.
thank you. Madam Clerk, any thoughts?
I agree. I would really appreciate that, and I think especially this year I had the chance in the closed session. It's very helpful for me, so, and I appreciate the time, so, yes.
Great, thank you for that. Any other suggestions? Looks like Mr. Rich actually has one, but I think the city manager may have a couple more, so whatever order y'all want to go in.
Well, I think we followed it this year, but again, as a way of reinforcing the schedule to really have the first, really to take a step back here. As Councilmember Burt pointed out, we submitted our self-evaluations on the 17th of July, which would presumably provide time during the break for at least a week, if not two, for council members to review that prior to being interviewed. And then scheduling those interviews in advance, ideally for that first week or two of August, and having that then lead into the following discussions that the council will have. I think setting that schedule and really sticking to it is what enables us to get to the steps that follow. I think our goal, or what we did this year, again, let me just double check the calendar, was the closed sessions happened between late September and early November. So I would think our goal should be to have those closed sessions with the CAOs, ideally in September, if we can, and if not, early October at the latest.
So I'm very interested in that. I think if we schedule it as a special meeting, it might even be a little easier not to have it crowded out from other council matters. And the one thing I would ask is that it be in the second week we're back, because some of us take vacations at the end of council break. I know that's what I did this time, and so, something that comes in mid-July, I wouldn't have read till August anyway, and that way we're sure that we really do have that time, but yet we're not delaying much. So I like the early August idea.
And I would just add that perhaps a special meeting for your closed session where you're discussing the draft write-ups would also be helpful, so that that's also not subject to the agendas themselves.
That makes sense. Thank you. Mr. Rich, sounds like you want to chime in on
Yeah, no,
this.
this is really good feedback. I mean, everyone obviously agrees on the timeline. I think there is a way to get it all done in September. It will take discipline by all parties. I mean, if you look at this year's schedule, there was a 1 month gap between that first closed session and then the actual meetings with the CEOs. And I can't speak with certainty, but my sense is that was just a scheduling challenge based on agendas and other things going on. So if you get it to special meetings, that de facto takes care of that problem. I'm also going to throw out a possibly radical suggestion, but that would shave a few weeks in the process for your consideration. And that is essentially eliminate where I, or whoever the consultant is, gives you the draft for individual comments, then come back to me, and then goes out as a final draft. Number one, it adds 2 weeks to the process. Number two, I did not get any feedback on a timely basis. And then number three, when you do get feedback, it's one individual or, individual people's. And then we have the group meeting, in this case, the late September one, whereas when all 7 of you are in the room together to react. And honestly, I think, and frankly, changes get made there, because that's the first time you're all sitting together reacting to something. So I think it'd be a lot more effective and efficient just to go straight to that first meeting. You guys can review my or whoever's raw draft, so to speak, because frankly, it's very hard for me to make changes based on 1 or 2 people's individual sentence changes, which might or might not, or generally don't reflect the consensus. My report is trying to be the consensus of the majority of the council. So I think you should just jump right to the chase and have that dialogue with all 7 of you and then make whatever changes you want, again, especially at a special meeting where you have more time to spend on it. And then that, that takes out 2 weeks of the process. If we do the others in special meetings, we can pick up another 2 or 3 weeks later in the process.
Yeah, I quite like that. I think you're right, that it's better for you to have a sense of, is it a majority opinion, if we're sitting there where you can figure out if it's a majority, and we can tease it out with each other. But I also wonder, I don't want to have a huge proliferation of special meetings, but, I could see us doing it, for example, I don't know if exactly the timing works out, but when do we do BCC interviews? Like, could we line it up so that we're here, we do that, and then we go back there and hash out the memos or something. But so if there's a time that we're physically in the building, but yet we didn't have regular council agenda items, that might be nice. Because I know we all sit on, as you say, Councilmember Byrd, a lot of different boards and things, and so that the nights get scarce. But I do think that doing it twice without being in the middle, doing it once with the interviews and then with what's our message, not in the middle of, you know what I'm trying to say, regular meetings, that'd be great.
If it's helpful for the committee, we generally do board and commission interviews twice a year, once in March and once in October.
Thank you.
So I could see that a special meeting might be also a time that we just have a study session item and not regular meeting. And then that breaks it up so that we're not trying to overload a given meeting. And I think it could work to not have those individual comments, solicitations, provided that, as we sound like we're moving in the direction of, we don't have a rushed conversation. And frankly, too often that's been the way it's been scheduled. So rather than being really thoughtful and being able to have real discourse, if it's, nope, we got to get out of here in this time and this is what it's been scheduled, we push another 15, 30 minutes, but we're still feeling rushed. And these are things that we should be thoughtful about and that we should be discussing in a meaningful way where we hear each other and build off of each other's experiences and thoughts. So as long as it's done in a way that allows us kind of an open-ended amount of time. So say we had a meeting and we had a scheduled amount of time for a study session or some interviews, and if that ended at 7 o'clock and we are scheduled to go to 9, but it takes till 10 because we want to take more time, that works or whatever. I just don't want to rush it. This is a really important task.
Yeah, I think, again, being a special meeting gives you more flexibility than not. And if you would take this suggestion of not having the individual comments, that first meeting becomes even more important and will take longer because, there's a lot more dialogue to be had. But I think it's doable.
Yeah, I like the suggestion, and maybe we could just kind of make clear that council members, that you're not going to revise the draft based on that individual feedback, but it likely would be, I would imagine, still helpful for you to invite that feedback, to be able to have that in writing kind of going in. I think that would also allow us to be a little more efficient and not be kind of wordsmithing in that meeting that council members have already submitted any of those type of changes. But you're not relying on that in order to be able to schedule that meeting. Yeah.
I think that's a good point, that some council members, really their work process, some prefer to have those written comments rather than kind of the oral discourse. And this would allow either. It doesn't mean that you'd revise it based on that. You just simply give that opportunity if people want to submit written comments. And that might be something that in our discourse we get to look at and see what we think of and start the discussion around that. But not that you would have to revise the draft on the basis of those comments.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion, and it would still help us consolidate the timing. But then we could have your comments, I'm assuming from the attorney and the manager, that we could provide those to the full council as part of the packet for the closed session. So you would have them a day or two in advance to at least see what each other had said. Again, some of you are very good at providing written feedback. Some want to just wait and we'll kind of riff off the conversation as it goes, and either way is fine. But those that want to provide written, I think that's a good idea, and then everyone could see it in advance and expedite things a little bit.
And then one last, oh, sorry, Vice Mayor, do you have any?
I was curious if there was more on the list from the city manager. No. And then I did have I was going to ask about how we take all this forward, but I think that's probably where you're going, and we could do it after your comment.
Well, it was almost there, just was one more kind of maybe request for information from Ms. Murdoch. As far as timing, you've been following the conversation about maybe kind of pulling out your piece, rescheduling it. As far as sort of your workload, what time of year would make the most sense to you to do these evaluations?
So I'm thinking about that, and I think, we're typically trying to come out with the annual audit plan in May, latest of June, so that we're ready to hit the ground running for July. So I would think in that March, April timeframe, if there's an expectation to incorporate some of the comments into that next audit plan.
Okay, great. And yeah, maybe March before we get deep into budget would be a good time to be able to schedule that. Great. Hearing, yeah. Okay, great. So yes, as far as next steps go, I mean, what does staff need from us tonight, or how are you going to incorporate this feedback?
What we will need is for Dan to update this timeline, but your recommendation to take this to council for their approval, and we'll attach the updated timeline.
So just a thought, I mean, I can write a memo to kind of summarize the conversation for tonight and share that back with you and with the CAOs. Traditionally, you do have a CAO committee meeting to kick off the process, which is where we go in detail on the timeline, the prompts and all that sort of stuff, which I would recommend continuing because I think that's really helpful. So I'm not sure, well, and honestly, another way to save some time in this process is not go back to council, to the full council on the process and timeline in June. The CAO committee could hypothetically be authorized, empowered to do that, and then simply, run with the timeline. But I don't know if it's necessary to bring this back to council now versus, kind of memorializing the conversation and then having next year's CAO committee kind of kick off the process with this in mind, and then either formally take that to council or not. Well, I mean, if we're making significant changes, I think it probably would make sense to go to council, but.
Yeah, I don't know if it's so much a council decision, but I would love to see this memorialized and sort of fed back to us in some way now while it's fresh in our minds, because we'll forget. I think there were a lot of good suggestions brought up tonight. I mean, I would defer to, I guess the city attorney or staff onto whether they're of a level that we need, formal council action. Because we're talking primarily about a special meeting, about maybe not circulating a draft. We're not changing it substantively in terms of self-evaluations that are written memos to staff, meeting with them, that kind of thing. So I don't know if, on the other hand, I want to be respectful to my colleagues, but.
Yeah, I think the biggest question for your colleagues would be, are they willing to do potentially 3 special meetings? So, but I don't know that you need to ask them now that question versus asking them in May of next year as we're kicking off the process.
Okay.
So to your point, to just give a status update of this conversation, it could be an information item to the full council so that they're informed of the discussion.
Well, yeah, and so that if for whatever reason one of us thinks it's not accurately captured or something was omitted or something, that we could, while it's fresh, do something, somehow give that feedback. So yeah, I'd just like to capture it now, but I think it's fine to talk about it in May. if my colleagues do.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think we would need to schedule a special CAO committee to reconvene just to discuss this. So I like the idea of the informational report and us be able to provide then feedback directly, maybe to Dan as individual council members, if we feel things were not transcribed.
And I would work with staff and with the chair of the committee to prepare, the summary memo to make sure everyone's on the same page of what it covers, and then that could go to council as an info-only item.
Yeah, and then the CAO in May, whenever we kick off this process, can discuss it then. Okay. Sounds good.
Chair Stone?
Yep.
If I may, before we move on to the next item, we do have a request to speak. It came in after we had closed public comment. Would you like to reopen public comment?
Sure, but let's just do 2 minutes because we've got a council meeting at 6.
All right. Our first request is from Herb B.
Thank you, Chair Stone. I had submitted a letter to you by email, and I got an automatic reply that you received it. And just to briefly cover those 2 items, one of them, I believe, Mr. Rich may have already covered, which is my concern of serial meetings, individual meetings with him. As I recall, when Lenny Siegel got on the council, in Mountain View, he understood that he couldn't meet with the majority of the council in private, but he could go see the city manager, Mr. Rich, and sort of send out his ideas, what he was interested in. And Mr. Rich had been meeting with the other council members individually and could tell him what would fly and what wouldn't, or what amendments would make it work. And so I expressed my concern about that in each of the processes that are going on. The second one has to do with, as I understood, has to explain by Mayor Lowing, who was previous chair of this committee, that the committee would agree with each CAO on goals and key performance indicators, and that the evaluations would be based on those. And I believe your calendar should include those when they are set, so that the public and press will know what they are, and when you have the open part of a meeting before a closed session where the public gets to speak, they can tailor their comments based upon the goals and key performance indicators and indicate to what extent they believe each of the CIOs are meeting or not meeting those KPIs. But if those are kept secret, then there's no effective way or meaningful way for the public to come before your closed sessions or the committee or the council, because we don't know if our comments have to do with anything that you will be using to evaluate the CIO's performance. So I would add in the calendar that when you agree with the CIOs, that you publish them. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, sure.
That does raise something that we had considered and not really acted on, is whether the key performance indicators would be something we'd want to have public. We had discussions on to what extent are they the same or different from the set of project goals that the city manager details and updates us on quarterly at least, if not more frequently. And we didn't really resolve that. So I think that we don't have to decide that tonight, but maybe we should roll that as an item for the kickoff meeting next year to think about that more.
I concur, but I would also appreciate any guidance, examples, et cetera, from other cities that have been public in terms of the detail, the scope, that kind of thing, and Mr. Rich's advice on that. So we didn't just come at it kind of cold in terms of the public KPIs.
Yeah, my recollection of the process was for the city manager, any KPIs that come out of the goals you set for him would be incorporated in part of the public process in January when council does their goal setting. So that is that. But just a reminder to the public, and obviously this is a confidential personnel matter, so the things that are discussed in closed session and in your performance evaluation are not intended to be public. But again, the city manager, when you do your goals in January, if there are specific KPIs related to the goals you've given him, then those would be discussed as part of that process.
Yeah, that's a good reminder. It would be still helpful, I think, to have some comparators. And even if what is discussed in closed session by us is not made public in that detail and to preserve the appropriate practices with respect to personnel reviews, we could hear public comment on it, which I think is part of Mr. Borak's point.
Yeah, I would agree that it would be helpful to have reference points. I think at VTA, we did go make our KPIs public. But I think it'd be valuable to do that. And then even as we go into this January meeting, I think it'd be good for us to be maybe have redistributed what we had as that feedback in the review sessions, so that we're looking at those in the context of when we're considering the council, the goals based on council priorities. But council priorities and citywide projects and initiatives are not the same as the what might be a key performance indicators for a given CAO. And I think they're different, and we should be thinking about that. And I think it's important for all of us to think that way.
Well, I would just add that, hopefully consistent with my comments on this topic over the last couple of years, I fully agree that they should be public, and that we have incorporated those both through the council priority setting sessions as well as a variety of performance measures we report, typically through our budget as much as other sources. So happy to continue to engage and ensure that we're covering the bases.
Great, so maybe we'll have a deeper analysis of that than when we kick off the process in May. And Dan, you can add that into your summary report if you can. Great. Okay, then let's move on to item 2, a discussion and recommendation to the City Council on next steps for the internal audit services contract with Baker Tilly, ends June 2026. And before I turn it over to staff for the city clerk's office, how much time do you need? Because I know you need to be able to kind of reset the room a bit.
5:45.
Okay, sounds good. We can make that happen. So I'll turn it over back to staff.
Thank you. Yes, I'll be very brief. The next discussion is regarding the current contract with Baker Tilly, ends on June 20th, 2026. We are asking for direction on your thoughts on whether to extend the contract. We have the option to extend the contract up to 2 years, or to renegotiate the contract if the CAO committee has a desire to modify the terms and conditions of the existing contract, that the contract would require renegotiation. And then the other option, if you wanted to explore alternative service providers, that would require issuing a request for a proposal. And the direction is necessary in that regard because of the time it takes to complete an RFP process. We do still have Kate Murdoch, our current city auditor, online if you have any questions for her.
Thank you. Any public comment on this?
We do not have any requests to speak.
All right, then back to the dais. Any thoughts? Yeah, go ahead.
I don't have a lot of thoughts. I don't think that, I mean, I'm not, I don't have reason to recommend an RFP for an alternate provider at this time. So then if the options are whether we extend up to 2 years under the current contract or renegotiate a new one, I guess I would want to understand the arguments for why we would renegotiate before I would lean that way. As I sit here, I don't know, what those are, so that's my thought.
So hear from staff on whether there are any thoughts that you have on why we might be considering renegotiating.
Good evening, everybody. Kylie Nozay, Assistant City Manager. I would say at this point in time, staff don't believe there's a need to renegotiate. Just as a little bit of history for the committee, about a year ago, we were in this position and the committee's direction and the council approved was to negotiate an up to 3-year extension, 1 year for certain, and then the option for the 2 additional years pending the completion of the annual appointee evaluation. So you've completed your annual review of the appointee. You've now debriefed on that process in your last item. And so this is really the next step of, do you want to exercise that option for the 2-year extension, or do you want to do something different?
And is it, the option is for 2 years, so it's not a 1+1 situation at this point?
I'd have to actually look at how we exercised that or how we wrote it in the contract itself. We might have written 2 1-year options.
Right.
We could take either direction from the committee.
Because to me, they're different. If it were to exercise, an additional year, I would lean toward that. If it's a 2-year decision, I would want to hear more from my colleagues first.
Fair.
I concur. I think we might want to go to a 1-year extension if that's part of the contractual option.
It looks to be 2 years in the contract. So if the council wish or the committee's recommendation was to renegotiate that to a 1 year, that could be the renegotiation. If I might take the space to just articulate, the auditor does work on an annual work plan, and it does take that full 12 months and then some to not only develop the work plan, but then execute the work plan. So it's almost like a budget cycle. So a 1-year extension only would even extend for a portion of that. It's almost an 18-month process. As they do their risk assessment and then move through the work plan and then execute the work plan. So for the committee's consideration, when you think about what is a 1-year contractual 12-month extension versus a 2-year, what does that actually get you in terms of the services from the provider?
Thank you for that. So that, I think, tends toward the 2-year. Also, when one renegotiates to 1+1, often that out-year rate goes up. That's just how negotiations tend to be. And so the point of the 2 years, usually you lock in a rate. So I don't see at this point reason to forego that, especially given what you just said. And although I will ask, not that I would expect to use this, but I would just ask, what kind of termination clause do we have? I'm a lawyer, I got to ask these things.
Yeah, I believe it is our standard termination clause, but let us confirm that.
Okay, thank you. There wasn't any. Yeah. We're going to make your timeline.
Staff's pulling up the original contract. Our standard termination is 30 days. So I would go with that assumption for right now and let us pull up the original contract.
Okay, thank you. I mean, assuming that we verify that there is one, my instinct would be to go ahead and exercise the 2-year option. But I think, I have no reason to believe we'd need an escape valve, but I think it'd be irresponsible not to have one.
If that's a motion, I will second it.
I'm wondering whether our auditor might have a copy of her contract.
I just located, section 19 of the contract says that the city may suspend the performance of the services in whole or in part to terminate this agreement with or without cause by giving 10 days prior written notice thereof to the consultant.
Wow. Okay. So having confirmed that there is a termination clause, okay, yes, that is a motion.
Great, let's call the vote.
Councilmember Burt? Chair Stone?
Yes.
Councilmember Vinker?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great, thank you. Any future agenda items? So thank you, Ms. Murdoch, appreciate you finding that for us. And the clerk's office, I know, really appreciates it, because we're going to get out on here in time. I can't speak either. So I guess future agenda items, we know we'll have the pre-evaluation kickoff meeting in May. I'm sure we're going to have something regarding city attorney early in the next year, but
Yes.
this will basically conclude at least this CAO committee for the year. So I just want to
Correct.
appreciate all the work that everyone has done. It's been great working with you both and with staff. Anything from staff then, before I close it out?
No, nothing further. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everybody. And we'll enjoy our 24-minute break before our city council meeting, so stick around. Thanks, everyone. We're adjourned.